Everyone knew correctly that my craftsmanship was exquisite. My wartime service was critical, my politics were lofty, and my contributions to the economy were numerous. My science was always competent and very creative. All who knows the name of David Rittenhouse knew quality, science, and scholarship. Welcome to my front yard. The bakehouse is what you're in, and this is where my family spent most of its time. The tables were bigger at that time, and the reason we had a bakehouse is because the home that was built by my great-grandfather there was actually a lot smaller. Long before I was born, they added on to the house because we had a large family. We came from Germany. And my grandfather extended the house, and it enclosed the oven. That made the house almost impossible to cook in from, let's say, May, June, July, August. It was way too hot. So we built the bakehouse out here. That way we could keep the fires running all the time, and we could bake the porridge and the puddings that we used to have in our area. What's kind of interesting about this location is you're right next to probably where my family sustained its wealth. Just outside this window was the old water mill. It was a paper mill. And what was kind of odd about this is that it was a new paper mill of a brand new design. My grandfather had built the paper mill first, and it was a couple up towards the avenue that you see there, but it was a water wheel that sat right in the water. When the water level would rise, the wheel would turn faster, the water level would go down, it'd be slower, and needless to say, we didn't know there could be flooding in this area. A flood came through, rising the creek somewhere around 7 feet, almost up to the house itself, and the mill was destroyed. So when my father built the next mill, we decided to make a flood-proof mill. And the way to do that is not to put the water mill in the water. You keep the water wheel separate, and you run a trough or a slough that actually takes the water and shoots it down a path, and you can control the amount of water going into the water wheel. So we could slow it down and we could speed it up. The one thing that you're not hearing, you can hear cars out there, but what you heard in my day was that incessant splash, 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 splash of the mill. Over and over again. You could hear it in this house, you could hear it in the house across the way. No matter where you are, that constant reminder, that constant repetitive splashing was something that I almost found calming. But it intrigued me because as a young boy, I lived here till about 2.5, maybe 3 years. After that, my father moved the family out to West Norriton. I came from a very wealthy family. They brought their wealth over from Germany, and that's what enabled them to build the first paper mill. And that wealth was passed on to me. Reason being, I was one of 10 children. Only 7 of us survived, but I was the eldest son. It was very common in my day that the eldest son would receive the property, but my father did it only under one condition, that I took care of my brother Benjamin and my sisters, and that I divided the wealth equally. So I actually became the caretaker of my family when my father died, and I inherited the entire farm that was out there in West Norriton. So the bakehouse has some memories of my family. We had my birthday celebrations here in years past. We would gather at this location. It was common that the fire would be raging. We'd all be very warm in this house. In fact, snug. Wintertime was my best memories. Just to give you a quick idea what was going on right here, this roadway was graded in modern times. So when I came out from my front door, this was my front step, and you step down 2 steps to the road. So the roadway was right here, flush with the land. As Fairmount Park came through and kind of bulldozed over through the area, they raised that mound there. That giant mound that you see over there, well, that's actually the mill where it caved in on itself. When Fairmount Park Commission bought the park, not only did it start to cave in, but they decided to bulldoze it. I was born in this house, and I moved out at about the age of 3. My family events were held here, and there were as many as 14 people that would stay on this property at one time. You're in the original house right now. We do not have the bedroom finished, but up through this area is where we all slept. So 14 of us in this one room with a little side partition for my parents over there. And It was in this house that I had some of the very first recollections of my lifetime, especially when I attended in my teen years and we had our family events that were here. I could say it's a house of modest means, but in colonial times, this was actually quite an extensive mansion. In fact, when we added on to the house, everything you see in this area is all an addition. Everything in this spot is all part of the original house. Very early on, my uncle took me out one evening to see a lunar eclipse. And that really mesmerized me. How the moon could precisely move in front of the sun required some type of mathematical challenge that I was up to. I remember going out multiple times doing some astronomy and observation with him, and it was that uncle that died that gave me his toolbox. This is a poor replica here, but when we talk about making a model water well, this one's made of, looks like popsicle sticks, but I did a much better version of what was involved because mine was a working model that would actually be able to put a little water through and see how that well or how that mill would work. As you make your way around the room, I started very early as a passionate student. In fact, these are some of the astronomical events that I was charting at that time. I would send my observations into Philadelphia. I corresponded with astronomers from around the globe. If Carolyn was here right now, we'd be talking about William Herschel. William Herschel had written me a few times wondering if he had found a comet or a planet. You might know him better as discovering the planet Uranus. And I would correspond with him, but I was corresponding through his sister, Caroline. Caroline did all the writing for him, so we think that we were actually in touch with each other quite a long ways back. In fact, my father, when he took me out to the farm, put me out in the plow, and to be honest with you, I don't have the physical stature to be a farmer. I have height, but I have no breadth. I have no muscle. I did not have the constitution to do plowing and planting. In fact, my father used to catch me in my off moments doing mathematical calculations on the farm tools that I had. He finally succumbed to this idea that I'd never follow in his footsteps and be a farmer, and he finally had said at one time, "I'd like to encourage you to be a clockmaker." He allowed me to put a small clock shop up out in West Norriton, and I was industrious. Hundreds of clocks were made. And once you start making clocks and you start selling them, your reputation starts to become known. I was very fastidious. I was a worrier. I would think the best possible way. These wooden gears, they just didn't suit me for clockmaking. I figured out metallurgy and how to make the gears proper and knew the mathematics to make the gears work together. I was able to make much more refinements in clock timing, and my goal was to make the ultimate timepiece. This is something that's going to haunt me through most of my lifetime, because when you think of a timepiece, you think of hours and minutes. But when I thought of a timepiece, I thought of hours, minutes, days of the week of the year, month that we're in, year that we're in, and I also wanted to do some representation of the phases of the moon. Some of my clocks even represented the equation of time, which was the position of the sun as it changes throughout the year on the noon meridian. I was not only famous for the inner workings, but look at the fine workmanship that I was able to create on the clocks themselves. Many people commented about the wood and the mahogany and the brass accoutrements. I was painstakingly working at all of the detail. I wanted to get the ocean waves to actually flutter a little bit so this ship would cross at certain points. And this clock right here, it doesn't show that well, but that's the sun in the center. And these are all mechanical gears. This is the entire solar system. And as this would move around, we would make the positions of the planets known. This is really a surveyor's tool, though, because we've taken a compass and we've mounted it with some sighting pieces so we can do sight lines. These are the chains that we used. They're called surveyor chains. This one, I believe, is about 33 feet. 66 feet was the accepted standard. I became a master surveyor, and I was called in for many of these survey lines. Have you heard of the Mason-Dixon line? I had part of doing that. It runs along the south edge of Pennsylvania. In fact, I was the one who developed that border and ran it all the way out to Pittsburgh. It was a tedious job. We would mark our location by where we were in the sun. We would mark the location on the earth with the staff at the end there, and then we'd take these surveying chains and start laying them out and walking through certain paces, and then we'd stop and take another observation of the sun. It was a way that we could continue these lines across the surface of the ground. The eclipse eclipse was an amazing event in my life, and it probably is the reason that I'm considered the premier astronomer and scientist of America. The reason being that my exact timing of the very first transit was exactly correct, and then the way that I carried out the work here actually impressed everybody. The competition that submitted all of their findings only really dwelled on this area here, but it was all these different observations and the observation of the sun and the rate that it was crossing the sun that actually enabled me to do a little bit better work. So I predict the eclipse. Worldwide, people know about me now. They've heard about my work, and I was now sought after to be a politician. As a politician and institute builder, I took over as the director of the Philosophical Society, but probably my most crowning glory was when Thomas Jefferson twisted my arm and said, "You've got to take over the mint." Well, I was a treasurer for the Secretary to the state of Pennsylvania. I was also involved with the finances of our nation. If you remember, Philadelphia was one of the first capitals of the United States, and I actually helped form some of those financial policies that they used. But as the director of the mint, I found heaven. Imagine the most amazing large machines with cogs and gears, pressing out metal, stamping out coins. I was on hand and made the first crank and made the first coin from the Philadelphia Mint. It was an honor to hand it to my friend, George Washington. In this picture, you see me standing here and Washington in front of me receiving that very first coin. It was a dream come true being a master of the mint.